About 10 years ago, I have moved to Chicago from New Jersey, and I was trying to find a better job. In New Jersey, I was doing miserable work, like selling hot dogs in Wildwood or putting umbrellas in the sand of the beaches. Long story short, I moved to Chicago and I didn't want to cook cheeseburgers on the Navy Pier. So I did something that all people are doing when they get truly desperate, trying to get a job. I lied. A lot. But to begin with, I borrowed $500 from my friend, I bought a nice suit, I made a nice haircut, I wrote a quite decent CV with a 9-to-1 bullshit to truth ratio. And I applied for the job to the small startup based in Chicago. Luckily for me, they were hiring people who knew both English and Russian and had at least 4 years of working experience in sales. And I met this criteria according to my CV, but not according to my background. So there were like 7 interviews with different managers. All of them are quite tough, and I passed all of them with flying colors. It's not something that I'm proud of, but I can say that I did really well with the startup, and I do not regret doing this stupid thing. Actually, this stupid thing taught me something. I have applied it later in 7 years when I launched my own business. I started to doubt the entire concept of recruitment. Recruitment based on interviews, because this system is just begging for being hacked. Everyone lies, trying to show his or her best qualities, because if they don't do it, somebody else is going to get this job. And there is huge upside and almost zero downside in lying. The traditional Russian proverb says «На словах он Лев Толстой, а на деле хуй простой», which could be roughly translated as when he talks, he sounds like really cool, like Leo Tolstoy, but when he does something with his hands, he is a simple dick. And yeah, simple dick is the actual translation of this proverb. In other words, when you are trying to hire someone using interviews, just talking to them and asking them different questions, all of them are trying to behave like Leo Tolstoy and just trying to behave cooler than they are, and you can't trust anyone who looks like Leo Tolstoy. They can be just simple dicks. Which happened a lot when I launched my own business, Bullet Point Agency. First I tried to interview people, ask them smart questions, but didn't work that well. So then we have implemented a new system. We started to give candidates for the business analyst position test tasks, like ultra realistic test tasks. And in this way, without actually interviewing anyone, we gathered a really world-class team of business analysts who are creating pitch decks and financial models for my clients. And the idea was very simple. We just invited 100 people for this job position using different methods, and we gave them 4-hour test task, and then we hired the best, those who just got the highest score. And when you do this, when you actually developed an ultra-realistic test task that imitates the typical working day of someone, you will get the best candidates. You will hire the best candidates. Actually, research suggests that this approach works much better than interviews. For example, Daniel Kahneman, who is the Nobel Prize winner and pioneer of behavioral economics, at some point of his life in 50s, when it was a really tough time for Israel, he had to reinvent the entire recruitment system of Israel militaries. And when he started his analysis, he realized that there is no correlation of opinions of recruitment managers and the future performance of candidates that they have chosen. I mean, it's kind of okay for huge corporation with limitless working capital to hire someone who doesn't work that good, but for small countries in the middle of desert surrounded by enemies all around, it's a matter of life and death. The same for small businesses. So as the alternative to the interview-based hiring, Kahneman developed a very simple but objective model where you simply put specific numbers in a scorecard, and as an output you get the prediction of performance of the candidate that you review. And you actually don't even have to talk to this candidate to make a decision. Or if you talk to him, you use very objective criteria, quantify everything and put it in the model. And as it turned out, the opinion of this model was much more accurate than opinion of experts. It had a much better predictive power. So Kahneman concluded that it's simply because we human beings are too biased, and when we see that somebody looks like a great officer, behaves like a great officer, and talks like a great officer, well, he must be a great officer, but it doesn't work like that. So when he reinvented the entire recruitment system in Israel military forces, later it was concluded that it has significantly contributed to the overall success of Israel army in that period of time. And then this approach was borrowed by major sport leagues, by huge companies. They decided to trust objective quantified models instead of subjective opinions of biased experts. So I'm going to share with you some tips on this interview-less approach, which could help you to get the most out of it. Tip number 1, build realistic test tasks. By saying realistic, I mean like ultra realistic. You have to make sure that each part of this task actually imitates the job. Ideally, you should take a typical day of work of someone in your company who is already working on this job position, and then deconstruct it and convert it to very small tasks that you put in the test task. Like, for example, for the business analyst position, we ask all candidates to draft 4 slides and prepare a very simple data book with some calculations. So each slide in this data book check different skills like market research, ability to structure, do market research, do analysis of customers' documentation. So it all reflects like 95% of the working day, of typical working day of analyst. It takes about 4 hours to complete this test task. So your candidates have to be really motivated. Anyway, tip number 2, you have to optimize. You want to test as many candidates as possible to find the best ones. And to make sure that it is really easy and fast to check these tasks, you have to prepare scorecards. These scorecards must have very specific criteria for each test, each test task in this entire test task, right? So you could create a type form questionnaire, for example, and the answers of your candidates would be checked manually by your assistant based on some guidelines, and the entire process is going to take 20 minutes max. And trust me, it saves a lot of time for your team, because simply compare this 20 minutes of your assistant to 3 or 4 hours of your team who have to interview this candidate face-to-face when you use traditional approach. So tip number 3, build a funnel. You have to invest time of your HR managers into sales and marketing to build this funnel, to have as many candidates at the start as possible, which are really motivated. So instead of making the initial call and asking some stupid questions which do not predict anything, you teach your HR managers to sell, like sell in a really aggressive, effective way your job position and your company. So when these candidates actually come to your office, and they will finish this 4-hour test task, and they will put their best efforts. Trust me, you will be extremely surprised with the results. You can actually interview some of the candidates that complete these test tasks and compare results of these test tasks with your impressions. And you will see that your initial impression was totally wrong. A candidate with whom you fell in love will get 2 points out of 10. And the candidate who didn't look promising at all in the interview, he will get 9 points of 10 or even more. So you may ask, but what? There are exceptions, right? Sometimes you do need to interview candidates. Well, I would say that no, there are no exceptions. Even if you hire someone for the CEO position, no, especially if you're hiring someone for the CEO position, you must not interview your candidates. You can have some polite small talk, but do not interview. Do not take this conversation into account. And for the complex job positions, it's even harder to predict future performance based on subjective opinion. Try this approach with a virtual assistant. Try to interview them and then ask them to complete test tasks and compare your prediction with the actual performance in the test task. And you will see that even for the very simple job like this, it's still impossible to make accurate predictions. And when it comes to really complex jobs like C-level jobs, well, it's even harder. So sometimes it doesn't work like 100% effectively. You will still be making hiring mistakes, like we did when we hired a guy for the business development manager position. And on the day number 4, I noticed that this guy was watching porn during his workday. And he was even texting with my co-founder at the same time as he was watching porn. You cannot predict stuff like this. I mean, of course you will be updating these test tasks all the time. You will, use this feedback loop to make it better and better, but still there is something that you cannot predict. But there is a lot of things that you could predict, like soft skills or cultural fit for your company, right? You still can quantify some behaviors during test task or video recordings or audio recordings. You can create a very objective, very specific scorecards that measures different aspects of this behavior, and you can predict their culture fit or soft skills, whatever you want to measure. And trust me, it's going to be much better than subjective opinion of your HR managers. So, good luck with the experiments in your business. I really believe that if you try this approach with hiring, you will be able to hire candidates with a much higher, much better skill set for any kind of job position that you're trying to find somebody for. So good luck, and please let me know in comments if you have any questions, if you have any additional ideas, if you have any concerns about this approach, and if you try it, then for sure please tell your story.